Wyoming native and author Megan Gebhart was at a crossroads when she was about ready to graduate from Michigan State University. She wasn't sure what to do. Well, she was kind of sure. She interviewed 52 random people.
And then I wrote the book 52 Cups of Coffee, and that's next on Wyoming Chronicle.
Megan Gebhart, a Wyoming native and Wyoming author, and now post-college student. We're so pleased that you can join us on Wyoming Chronicle.
Craig, thank you so much. It's so exciting to be here.
We're going to get a great opportunity to talk about your book, 52 Cups of Coffee, here in a little bit, Megan, but I want to start a little earlier in your life than that. You were born and raised in Gillette. You were a cross-country runner. Tell us about your high school years first.
Man, my high school years were such a wonderful kind of time of reflection. I think growing up in Campbell County, there were so many amazing opportunities. So really involved in the cross-country track and field program, really involved in the DECA program, and just spent my high school years, being a really active student, athlete, and taking advantage of all the great things Campbell County had to offer.
You were a good cross-country runner. You placed third at the state meet your senior year.
Yes, so close to being first, but the Cheyenne Central girls were better sprinters than I was. So
but your team still won its 12th in a row.
Yes.
Your senior year, so that's fantastic. So what were you thinking then on your way to college? You had planned when to go to Michigan State University, where you graduated from.
I remember being really excited to go and explore, somewhere in the U.S. When I found out there were colleges all over the U.S., I thought, well, I definitely want to go and see what the rest of the country has to offer. And I was really fortunate to get the STAR Scholarship, which is an amazing scholarship opportunity for Wyoming high school students to get an opportunity to go to Michigan State. Every year they give 6 full rides to Michigan State. So I was really excited to go to Michigan State, and really lucky because when I got there, Michigan is pretty far from Wyoming, and there were 24 other Wyoming students there at the time, and so we would get together often. And so there was this great Wyoming community at Michigan State, so I kind of got the best of both worlds, the Wyoming connections and the new experience of Michigan State.
So you actually wanted to run, at least originally, on Michigan State's cross-country program. And that you did so for a year. And after that 1 year then, you left the team, but you found yourself, I think, at a crossroads. Your social support that you've had in high school and in college with the team helping you along all of a sudden disappeared.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
I underestimated how much running was just a pillar and the structure it provided to my life, not only in having a coach looking out for me and teammates that supported me, but also just the daily goal to run however many miles you were supposed to run that day. And so I think a lot of my friends, their freshman year, went through this kind of loneliness and feeling of disconnection, which I didn't get until my sophomore year when I left the team. And I just remember for the first time not really knowing what it was that I was supposed to be doing with my days. Of course, I was still interested in running and still running, but I left the team because I was interested in exploring more. I wanted to take advantage of the entrepreneurship opportunities at Michigan State, the study abroad experiences at Michigan State. So I was lucky that I had another community of entrepreneurs that were supporting me, but there definitely was this transition of, now I'm really on my own. What am I doing here in college?
And how did you bridge that transition then? What was next for you at Michigan State?
I was really fortunate during that time, my sophomore year, where it was the most difficult. I was working on a project and I had an advisor who was working with a different student, and out of the blue that student reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to get a cup of coffee. And so I met with him at this Barnes & Noble and we chatted, and I didn't think anything would come from the conversation. I thought it would just be fun to get to know someone. And we ended up sparking this really incredible friendship that led to another connection and another connection and another connection. And suddenly I was a part of this really vibrant community of entrepreneurs who were trying to just explore all different things. Some people were starting social media companies. Someone was trying to start a bamboo t-shirt company. Just students that didn't want to follow the traditional, get a degree, go right into the workforce. They wanted to try something different. So
now, let me ask you a question, Megan. It seems to me maybe in your high school life, and at least up until that point in your life, you had a real structured, this is the procedure.
Yes.
We get the degree in high school, and then we go to college and we get the degree, and then we get a job. And now things started maybe to change in your thinking?
Yeah, I think that I had always been intrigued by entrepreneurship and Silicon Valley and just all of the innovation that was happening in different communities around the US. And I think a lot of that came from my grandpa was an entrepreneur in Wyoming and a politician. And I think I was just always inspired by the idea that you could kind of pave your own way instead of going the route of helping someone else pave their way. You could write your own story. And so the entrepreneurs, they shared that same spirit. So even though I loved the structure of running and teams and even the structure the university provided, I think deep down I was really excited about what could I do that was new and different than the traditional.
And this is really why we're here today. You've done something that's new and different, Megan. We're at Metro Coffee Company in Casper. Very pleased to be here. Your book, the genesis of your book, 52 Cups of Coffee. When did it go on in your head that this might be a scenario for me, not only for a senior project, but more?
Yeah. So it really actually started with that cup of coffee my sophomore year. And this wonderful community that I fell into, and I was surrounded by these really inspiring people that were doing interesting things. And I think the magic of surrounding yourself with interesting people is that it kind of challenged me anyways to figure out, well, what am I doing that's interesting? And so I was really looking for a way to spend my senior year, and I stumbled upon this quote by Twyla Tharp, which goes something to the effect of, where you are in 5 years depends on the people you meet and the books you read. And the quote just really stuck with me because I could trace so many of the opportunities in my life back to that one cup of coffee my sophomore year, and even on a wider scale, how I ended up at Michigan State, really I could draw to connections that I made in Wyoming. So I was looking for a year-long project, and curiosity got the best of me, and I thought, if one new connection can have such an impact, what if I just devoted an entire year to having coffee with strangers and writing about it?
So that was a genesis. It started in your senior year then. You had your first cup, and you would meet people at coffee shops much like the one that we're at. You've met people from Wyoming, from across the nation, from across the world. Tell us about your thought process on arranging the people that you met from cup number 51 to back to cup number 1.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I had decided in March to do the project, and I was waiting until my birthday, which was in July. And I spent so much time thinking about it, and I launched the project, the website, the blog, and then my next thought was, I actually have to find someone to get coffee with. For some reason, it hadn't occurred to me that I'd have to do that part of the process. And so I started, the first 10 cups were either people that I had admired from afar, people that I knew of, but under other circumstances wouldn't have had the, courage to reach out to. And then also, the other half of that were just recommendations. So for example, the Cup 2 and Cup 3 happened in Wyoming.
Sure.
I was coming home for Cheyenne Frontier Days, and I asked my aunt, do you know someone who's interesting that would be willing to sit down and have coffee with me? And so she recommended Rita Meyer, who at the time was on the campaign trail for the race to be governor. And then I was in Gillette, Wyoming, and my mom said, there's someone who comes into the library all the time who's so interesting, I think you'd like to get coffee with them. So a lot of it came just through recommendations from people who I trusted and people who really knew what I was trying to achieve through the project.
The coffee in Gillette. Tell us more about that. Gentlemen,
Yes.
in not necessarily a coffee shop for sure.
Right.
How did that work out?
So Cup 3 is August Crabtree. He's been in Gillette for years and years, a patron of the library, which is where my mom works. He is just such a fascinating person. He's has been in and out of, homeless at different points in time, is a recovered alcoholic, and just someone that I think a lot of people wouldn't think much about or would kind of look over. And my mom, having known him, thought he would be, he's someone who would have an interesting story to tell. And he doesn't have a cell phone, he doesn't have an email address. He came into the library and my mom said, my daughter is doing this project, would you want to get coffee with her? And he said, sure. Send her to Starbucks, tell her to order the August latte, they'll know what it is, and meet me at the fishing lake. So, I did what he said, and I drove to the fishing lake, and we sat under this big oak tree by the water.
Some trepidation maybe on your way?
A little bit of trepidation. I was actually on a road trip with one of my best friends, and so she came with me, and I think she went for a run around the lake while we sat and talked. But it ended up being a really amazing conversation because, I think he's someone who he doesn't get a chance to share his story very often. And so I think over the course of an hour and 20 minutes, I asked him 3 questions, and the rest of the time he just told me everything that he felt like telling me, and it was really amazing. And one of the early examples of everybody, regardless of what they do or what they look like, everybody has a story to share and a lesson that they can teach you. So he was definitely one of my favorite cups of coffee.
You kept progressing in the book. Mm-hmm. Tell me your workflow. Did you meet with someone, write their section, and then plan next week's, or did you interview several, get back to the writing?
Yeah.
How did that work out for you?
In an ideal world, I would have interviewed, written, had coffee, in a more systematic way. At the time, I had an internship and college classes, and it was a little bit fly by the seat of my pants. I think at the most, I only ever got, 2 or 3 interviews ahead. So I really did try to write as soon as I was interviewing them. But in terms of when I would set up the coffees, some of the coffees were set up 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Others were set up the day before.
Sure.
It was as structured as it could be, but also gave me the freedom to be kind of spontaneous and enjoy my senior year as well.
Had you planned on writing a book at this early stage? Was it going to be a book, or was it still just maybe a blog, or had we made the commitment yet?
It definitely, I was very short-term goal focused. The goal was to get to have those 52 cups of coffee and write about those 52 stories, and that was really as far as I was thinking. To be honest, I got to cup 23 and I was in a coffee shop over Christmas break while in a blizzard by myself thinking, why did I sign up for this? 52 is a really big number. And so I really just wanted to achieve the goal of having the 52 conversations. It wasn't until the end of the project where the blog had picked up traction and I knew that people were reading it that I really felt like, wow, like people care about this project and people would care to see it in a book. So it was after the fact that the book became a thing.
I think an interesting part of the book for me was this is not just the story of the person that you interviewed, it's your reflection about it and how you reacted to the gentleman in the pickup, or the gubernatorial candidate, or the co-founder of Apple, or the head basketball coach at Michigan State, and the list goes on, and we'll talk about more of those people in just a minute. But you were searching for something that just struck me along the way. What were you searching for?
It's really interesting. It wasn't until I finished the project that it became clear that I was so crippled by the anxiety of graduating. When I graduated from high school, I knew I was going to Michigan State, long before I graduated. But with college, there were so many options and I was so lost about what option to pick. And so I think I naively thought that if I could spend a year talking to really smart people and ask all of my questions, by the end of the year I would have all of the answers. And I would graduate with none of the uncertainty of what life would hold. And in retrospect, realize how ridiculous that was. And the uncertainty and the anxiety, will always be there. But really, the whole project was this search for how do I live my best life, or how do I make the decisions that will make me happy and successful? And it's really amazing that, over the course of those 52 cups of coffee, those people actually indirectly gave me the answers that have helped me make the transition to the real world.
We had a couple comments in your book I want to explore with you, Megan. One was that the education system needs a few renegades to shake it up.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I now live in San Francisco where every company is trying to disrupt some sort of system, but at the time, when I wrote that, I was a marketing student and I was taking these classes, and it was all a little bit behind the times. It's really hard for education to move as quickly as the real world. And I saw all of these students that were working really hard, but maybe, the work they were doing wasn't setting them up for, the success. Like the work they were doing in college might not have reflected the real world. And just, wanting the education system to move quickly, as quickly as the real world was moving. And I didn't think it was moving that quickly. And I think I was thinking a lot of people were following in these footsteps instead of trying to figure out how to do things on their own. So just wanting people that were bold and willing to go a little bit against the grain of this institution that had been around for hundreds of years.
Is that happening in your mind yet?
I think in different pockets it definitely is happening, and it's really great to see so many students that are taking education into their own hands. There are so many resources outside of a traditional university degree, and so to see people take advantage of those and to spend their free time working on side projects like 52 Cups or starting businesses is really, really exciting to see.
You have struggled, or you prioritize experiences now over material goods, and I think that there was maybe a little bit of conflict as you entered this project about what success meant to you. Where are you at in that journey?
I think that what success looks like is probably a question that I will always think about, and my definition of success will definitely always change. But I think where I'm at right now is, are you able to spend your time doing something that feels authentic and engaging while also able to have a roof over your head and food on your table? So I think for me, success has really become about looking inward at what will authentically make me happy and make me feel like a success, instead of kind of exploring the external world and kind of looking at what success should be. I think that's a really hard struggle for people to have so many different things sending you messages of what success is supposed to be, and it's really hard to drown out those messages and actually for yourself decide what it looks like. So it's still a struggle, but I do think I'm on the right track towards success for what I want success to be and not what the world tells me success should be.
I gathered from your writings that you like underdogs.
Yes.
Is that true? Or at least the underdog story.
Yeah, I think the underdog often seems to be the scrappiest and, the person with a lot of heart. And I think those are the stories that I most love. The people that are just, they have a lot of fight in them and a lot of passion in them to overcome whatever it is that's thrown at them. And I love those stories. I think those stories, more than any other, give you faith in humanity and what the human spirit is capable of.
Again, to remind our viewers, we're visiting with Megan Gebhart. She has written a book, 52 Cups of Coffee, where she met 52 essentially random, unknown folks, visited with them, and then wrote about the experience. Did you find yourself really wanting to know more from some of your cups of coffee interactions? Like, this is just too short, but I don't have time. I wish there could be more. At least I found myself wanting to know more about some of your interviewees.
There were a couple conversations that were, I think the longest conversation I had was like 3 hours. It was amazing when you felt a connection and had a great conversation with someone and had the time to really explore it. But there were so many people that I walked away from our short time together feeling so invigorated. I think that's what kept me going, was those conversations where you just connect on something and you feel so alive. And fortunately, I was able to stay in contact with a lot of them.
Do you still today?
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
stay in contact with them, via email, or fortunate enough to run into them if I'm visiting, whatever city they're living in. But then also just the magic of social media, to be able to kind of be a fly on the wall of their life, is really amazing. And to watch, just to watch their journey, to know a lot about them and how they got to where they are, but then also watch their journey unfold is really special.
Which has included some failures and some repurposing and some regenerating of ideas and having things go again.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about you right now. We're a couple years since this project kind of completed. Megan, where are you at? What are you doing? And where are you going?
It's funny, this is right around the 5-year anniversary of finding the quote that read, "Where you are in 5 years depends on the people you read, or the people you meet and the books you read." So 5 years later, I live in San Francisco. I work for a tech company called Airbnb, and I continue, fortunately, my life is still filled with meeting interesting people and getting to know people from all walks of life.
Interesting. Let's talk about some of your most memorable interviews. I'll let you share with me, perhaps, some that have really had the most impact on you as we wrap things up here today.
One of my absolute favorites is Janina Pasek, who I met with her. She was one of the very last people I had coffee with. She's an 86-year-old grandmother in Poland, doesn't speak any English. And the way I ended up having coffee in the middle of nowhere Poland with her is her grandson was Cup 17, Peter Pasek. He was a student at Michigan State, actually an introduction from one of the Wyoming Star Scholars. We had an amazing conversation, and we stayed in touch. We developed a really good friendship, and I went traveling to Europe after graduation. He went home to visit his family, and he invited me to come stay with him. And he told me about his grandmother, who was 18 when World War II broke out. She joined an underground resistance movement. All the men around her age were sent to prisoner of war camps or off to war, and just a phenomenal story. And I said, I have to interview your grandmother, and he was so gracious to be our translator. So I had this moment in that conversation that really reaffirmed what really inspired me to start the project, which was this hypothesis that if you invite 52 new people into your life, it is bound to change. And I knew my life would change by doing the project, but I had no idea how. And so as I was sitting there in Poland hearing these stories, it just really struck me that this came true. Like, I never in a million years would have imagined that this conversation at East Lansing, Michigan would have led me to, outside of Warsaw, Poland, talking about World War II with an 86-year-old grandmother. So it really illustrates to me the power of meeting someone new and the fact that you never know where a new connection will take you.
Can I throw one of my favorites in?
Yes.
And I hope I get his name pronounced. Barry Litwin?
Yes.
Ended up in vet school.
Yes.
Through being a trapeze artist. Mm-hmm. And some other things before. Talk to me about Barry.
He worked in Jamaica as a dishwasher, and then he became the personal assistant of this very successful eccentric millionaire, and then he became a trapeze artist and then a real estate broker, and his dream was always to work with horses. So, much later in life, he ended up going to vet school at Colorado State, and his story was just, this story of you're not stuck in one track. Like, life is an ever-evolving thing, and if you don't like one chapter, you can work hard to open up a new chapter of your life and go down a new path. You
visited with a young Lakota girl. Mm-hmm. Tell us more about her.
Her story, she was a Lakota girl who was adopted by someone that worked at the library with my mom, and her story was amazing because it was really a story of how a lot of our issues with hate or discrimination are really, seated by this just ignorance of just not knowing. And if you stop to get to know someone and really understand their background, it really reduces a lot of, I think, that hate or discrimination that we often see, especially in today's world. And more importantly, really understanding that we can be surrounded by people. I knew her parents, for 15 years and had countless stories with them, but never took the time to really dig deep and hear the story the story below the surface. So knowing that if you really take time to ask hard questions, you can uncover really beautiful and valuable lessons.
And this young girl heard some tough things.
Yes.
On the playground. Share a couple of those with us.
She had, she was in kindergarten, and on the playground, some of the other students would run up to her and say, you're an Indian and your people would scout my people, and really hard concepts for a 6-year-old to understand, especially, knowing that her parents are wonderful, loving people, and so to be, pegged for doing horrible things to other people, it was just really hard. I mean, those are really hard, issues for someone who is 6 years old to understand, and for the students, in her classroom, they worked really hard. Her mom went into the classroom to help those students understand as well, to really use this as a teaching opportunity for, both people.
Megan, your book is a great read. It's a quick read,
yeah.
But it makes you think. I think it leaves readers wanting more. Any more cups of coffee in your future?
Yes, I am. After the project ended, I continued to have coffee, and I wrote about several of those at 52cups.com. But every day, I'm kind of exploring new ways to tell stories. So how do I continue to have coffee with strangers and tell their stories? A couple projects in the works, nothing major yet, but yes, hopefully someday there's a sequel of some sorts.
People can purchase 52 Cups of Coffee on Amazon, either in print or on Kindle.
Yes.
Would make a wonderful graduation book, I think, for any high school or college student. Be a wonderful Christmas gift. And Megan, it's been our absolute pleasure to have you with us today on Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you. It's been so wonderful to be here.